All right, aloha and good morning. Welcome to the Vibrant Hawaii convening of the Economy and Education panel. My name is Ashley Kirkwitz. I chair the economy stream. I am joined by the chair of the education stream, Chancellor Rachel Solomsas, and also co-hosting this panel with us is the chair of the CEDS substream, Farah Marie Gomes. An overview of today's agenda. We will begin with our Vibrant Hawaii grounding statement, launch into a participant poll to see who is joining us today, provide folks with an overview of the work of the education and CEDS streams, a rundown of the conversations we've hosted to date, and then we'll go ahead and get started with our panelists. Vibrant Hawaii is a growing community that commits to individual and collective aumo kuleana to increase equitable opportunities to build wealth, an abundant reservoir of human, social, natural, and financial capital that we contribute to and draw upon. Carolyn?
Our kuleana is to convene conversations so that all wa'a can travel toward a common goal, build community awareness, will, and action from the foundation of our shared values, shift deficit narratives, systems, and policies that perpetuate poverty and inequity, and implement strategies that are developed and resourced by the community and reflect Native intelligence.
Thank you.
Is it still me? We value equity and belonging, and we demonstrate this by being willing to let go of our assumptions and biases about each other, speaking up when we recognize barriers that prevent us from participating, prospering, and reaching our full potential, promoting full family engagement and participation, and raising our own and our collective belief that wealth, abundance, and prosperity is not a pie. More for others does not mean less for ourselves.
Thank you. Diane?
Morning. We value aloha and we demonstrate this by acknowledging that aloha is unique to Hawaii. It is from this place. By valuing aloha, we value the vast and unique genius of the people of Hawaii, and we prioritize the knowledge, skills, and solutions of its people, recognizing that aloha is an action modeled to us by our environment, and we validate its aloha through aloha aina, and a willingness to suffer a little so that no one has to suffer a lot.
Thank you. Austin?
Sure. We value aumo kuleana, and we demonstrate this by a commitment to empowerment rooted in our belief that everyone has skills and abilities but needs circumstances and opportunities to express them, promoting language that recognizes a person's abilities and shared ownership and accountability. If any one of us stumbles, we all fall because we are all connected.
Hamia?
Aloha, good morning. We value flexibility and learning that leads to transformation, and we demonstrate this by being honest without shame when we don't know, being courageous, adaptive leaders, even when it calls for difficult conversations, and even when our outcomes look like failure. Demonstrating ahonui and ha'aha'a as we hold tension to achieve change, and practicing makawalu and acknowledging that we each hold one piece that is a part of something bigger.
Thank you so much. Launching our participant poll at this time. If you could complete it, scroll through to get to all of the questions. You have to complete them all in order to submit.
I didn't quite fill out exactly what I should have because I couldn't get it to scroll or anything. So I apologize.
It's totally fine, no worries.
I should be in education, not engaged citizen, I think. But that was the only one that was available to me.
Okay. There are a number of folks in the education sector today, as well as representation from business, philanthropy, and government, no one from social services or faith, and a number of engaged citizens. We have a number of folks joining us from Hilo, and there's actually representation from all around the island, which is awesome. Nobody identifying as youth and one individual identifying as Kupuna. Thank you. Okay, if I could turn it over to Farah and Chancellor Solimsas to provide us an overview of the CEDS substream and the work that the education stream is doing.
All right. Aloha, everyone. Happy Monday. And I guess this is the week where we start to, be grateful and provide thanks to certainly to Ohana and our kauhale. I also wanted to acknowledge Tamia McKeag, who serves as co-chair for our education stream. And certainly there's a number of members from our stream. So as part of the Vibrant Hawaii collective movement, where each of the stream or topics, and we're following up from feedback from the community. For the education stream, we build on the Aloha Plus challenge that really represents that education is the pillar to vibrant communities, and thus through the Aloha Plus challenge, we were able to focus 4 particular substreams or themes, starting with AINA-based education, a key part of equitable access to education, workforce development, which is co-hosting, that substream is co-hosting with the CEDS stream, and of course, transformational learning. And so it is our intent to continue to define each of the streams, identify some policies and connections and programs that we can begin to provide some collective movement in enhancing and strengthening our education for Hawaii Island. Mahalo.
Mahalo, Chancellor, for that update on the education stream. And I will give a quick update on the CEDS substreams. So CEDS stands for the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy. And this group is a substream of the larger economy stream of Vibrant Hawaii. And for the past, I guess it would be 2 months at this point, every other week we have been hosting panels in various industries, and we'll get into a little bit of those details in just a bit. The purpose of these panels is to help provide input into the next version of the CEDS document. So what's provided on the screen is a snapshot of the cover page for the CEDS document that we are currently in the last year of implementation for, the 2016 to 2020 version. This document ultimately gets submitted as part of a larger state plan. So each of the 4 counties in Hawaii has individual plans, and the state of Hawaii has a CEDS plan also. This is part of a larger initiative under the Economic Development Administration, the EDA, a federal bureau. And the idea is that these documents would identify specific strategies from regions and including input from communities who are empowered to give input about what they feel will work specific in their region to drive economy for the next 5-year period. So linking that to today's discussion, really identifying software as a subset of the economy, larger conversation that we're having. And is there a place for this to be on the map for Hawaii County as part of our economic development, economic recovery? So very much looking forward to today's conversation. And thank you in advance to all of our panelists for joining us this morning.
Thanks, Farah. And as Farah alluded to, we've hosted conversations every other week for a couple of months now. We kicked things off with creative and performing arts, had conversations about regenerative and community-based tourism, sustainable and resilient food systems, tech industry, which really span a gamut of renewable energy, aerospace, as well as cesspool conversion. We talked about healthcare and wellness. A couple weeks ago, we hosted a conversation about education, and we're wrapping things up today with software technology. These are sectors that were identified by our community after a years-long talk story circuit with folks. We wanted to make sure that we were being very mindful and inclusive of communities so that when we are advocating for something, we know that it is something that our community is going to be okay with, because this started with them. If you would like to be involved in more of these conversations, we meet every other Thursday. The next meeting for this particular group will be announced at a very soon. And the plan is going to be for us to be working as a Hui to revisit all of these conversations and then begin to craft the action plan, which will identify all of the stakeholders from government, private sector, public sector, community, nonprofits, all taking meaningful action so that we can actually take some meaningful progress towards realizing these diverse buckets of economy. So thank you for joining us, and segueing into today's conversation. The goal is to talk story with folks that have an expertise in software technology. They know the barriers, the challenges, as well as the solutions. So we wanted to hold space to talk story with these folks. So Farah, do you want to kick us off with introducing our panelists?
Absolutely. Getting us started this morning, and we are going to be alternating our introductions this morning. So I'm honored this morning to introduce Caroline Landry, a computer engineer by training. Caroline previously designed logic circuits for NVIDIA in Silicon Valley, including a module for the first Xbox. Nowadays, she teaches computer science and at Parker School and participates in various community efforts: Vibrant Hawaii, the Kukio Community Fund, Big Island Face Shield Group, and generally advocates for computer science education in schools, seeking to empower young people to create and control technology as a great skill for success. Caroline lives in Waimea with her husband and 2 children. Welcome, Caroline.
All right, aloha. It's my honor to introduce Chris Lee. Chris Lee is the motion picture and television producer, the first Asian American to run production at the Hollywood studio, as the president of production at TriStar Pictures and Columbia Pictures, and the founder and director of the University of Hawaii Academy for Creative Media System, which supports media programs on all 10 campuses and is dedicated to diversifying our economy.
It's my pleasure to introduce Noel Marin. Noel, a Hilo resident, is a Silicon Valley product management veteran who worked remotely for eBay for 15 years. He's a small business owner, climate action advocate, and supporter of sustainable transportation and renewable energy. Noel also dedicates time to programs that encourage our youth to explore STEM careers. He shares his expertise with Next Tech Hawaii and Hawaii STEM Community Care. Welcome, and thank you, Noel.
And I get the pleasure to introduce our 4th panelist this morning, Austin Stewart. Austin is a technologist and entrepreneur with a decade of software engineering, project management, and team building experience at Silicon Valley firms such as Apple and Twitch Interactive. As vice president of engineering at fintech startup Expert Financial, he led the effort to deploy the first fully automated electronic trading system approved by the SEC for the exchange of private company securities. Austin delivered major updates to Twitch's iOS and Android clients, growing mobile viewership and propelling the company towards its $970 million acquisition by Amazon. As a mentor, it is Austin's goal to equip young people with analytical skills, technical ability, and audacity to meet head-on the unprecedented challenges of the 21st century. Welcome, and thank you for joining us this morning, Austin. At this time, we are going to provide a few minutes to each of our panelists to provide opening remarks. Each panelist, you will have 3 minutes to share any information that you would like to provide in helping to lay the foundation for today's conversation on software creative media, including the lens that you are coming to us from, and any high-level overview for the work that you are doing, especially your thoughts on lifting up tech industry that can assist Hawaii in a thriving economy for the future. So at this time, we'll go in the same order that we did introductions. And if you can just time yourself approximately for the 3 minutes, we'll start with Caroline, please.
Thank you. So I do think we should work toward developing a software industry on the Big Island because it brings high value employment mostly, and it improves our trade balance by favoring exports of intellectual property as opposed to goods. Developing a software industry helps Hawaii because it brings more dollars to our economy and contributes to tax revenues. But in order to get there, we need a committed partnership between K-12, post-secondary, workforce development, and industry leaders to take action. And here I am quoting the promising credential report that was just published. Let's talk about exports first. The exports of goods and services are helpful to Hawaii's economy. Simply put, it brings more dollars into our economy. So while tourism will remain, we need to diversify. We know we need to develop new sectors to bring prosperity and stability. One of our traditional challenge to export has been transportation, as we know. Goods are expensive to carry. And in fact, we are the 50th largest state exporter of goods, and it's been declining. So the great thing about software as a product is it's purely intellectual property that travels on the web. We can leverage this optic fiber network that we have, and we are very well connected to the world and to the mainland. And we are definitely able to take advantage of that in the software industry. So let's talk about employment. Where it does require post-secondary credentials to be a leader in the software industry, it is true that college graduates in computer and technology related fields earn easily six-figure salaries right out of college, which would be very nice to have here, you know, people that have this level of prosperity and spending power, and also ability to share with others their skills, and then they can also hire and contribute to be entrepreneurs, and we can have we can incubate our own startups here and start by having perhaps we can bootstrap our high-skilled workforce by importing workers. A lot of workers like to come from California and the mainland who have those skills already, and then they can be used as mentors, and they like to get engaged and network. And so from this network, we can have people who will be wanting to start some software companies here. Whoops, that was the end of my 3 minutes. So that was my opening remarks. We can talk later about education and what we need to put in place to make this happen.
Excellent. Thank you, Caroline. And we'll go to Chris next. Chris, you're on mute.
Good morning, aloha kako. Mahalo, Chancellor, for inviting me to join this panel today and be a part of this Zoom. I'm on Oahu. I grew up here. I left to go to college. I worked in New York, San Francisco, and Los Angeles in the film and television business. And then I came home and I started the Academy for Creative Media, which is the first system-wide program at the University of Hawaii. We started at Manoa, but now we support programs at all 10 campuses on all the islands. With the advent of our West Oahu program, we've been able to create articulation agreements between all of the community colleges to the West Oahu program. So if you start your degree at Hawaii CC Hilo or Kauai CC, you can continue on to a BA. We have one entire BA that's online at that campus. If you look behind me, these are renderings of our new student production facility, which is coming online right now as we speak. It's 33,000 square feet of the most up-to-date, state-of-the-art technology in the business and rivals anything you will find in any mainland school. The programs are all very complementary. We do different things at different campuses, and we encourage as much collaboration between the campuses as possible. As Caroline was saying, the very premise of this school is that broadband connects us in ways that ships and planes cannot. Hawaii will, in my opinion, and I think this has been borne out certainly in the almost 20 years that I've been home, never compete economically for anything that requires a raw good to be shipped in and a hard good to be shipped out. I find that we are in an enormous opportunity time right now because of COVID, because it has forced us to rethink our reliance on tourism and the easy dollars that seem to come from that. And to think about what it is that we can export, as Carolyn was saying, basically in the areas of IP. Now, my specialty tends to be film and television because I've been a producer in that field in the past. But creative media, and the reason I don't call it the film school, though we have a brilliant film program at the Manoa campus now, I don't call it the film school in general is because film is just one platform. It's one way of telling a story. And so much has transformed, particularly since we even started the school. So while the Manoa campus is very much driven by curriculum that you would find at USC and American Film Institute, the West Oahu campus is the transmedia school. So everything that happened before, when we started, I remember there was Friendster and I was going to use it somehow. But there was no other platforms. There was no smartphones. There was basically no social media. And so we've seen this transformation in the way production is done, and more importantly, the way distribution is done, where there are all these free platforms that are available easily to anybody who just can come up with some sort of compelling content of some sort. The other thing I'll say that's happening because of COVID that I hope we take advantage of, and I noticed that a number of the individuals here basically either came from here or decided to move here, but after working in tech companies on the mainland is, I think, all of the tech companies which have done extremely well during this pandemic have basically told all of their employees, you can work from wherever you want. My niece, who went through our program at Manoa and now is working in cloud AI at Google, has been told, don't come back to the building until at least 2022. Where I think the state is missing an opportunity is, while other places have been actively trying to recruit these digital nomads, we haven't really made that effort. And the thing that I will say about economic export, and I'll close with this, and then we'll get back into questioning, thing that I always say about our economic exports is after sugar and pineapple, our #1 economic export was our children. And basically what I think Hawaii has to do is to look at itself more in the way that, say, China and India and other countries looked at the continental US and invested their children in the mainland, but then brought them back because they had the unique ability to take that information and integrate it into their own communities. We have a bit of a habit here in Hawaii of bringing in a lot of people from the mainland to tell us what to do at very high prices, and we tend to get mad at them and they get mad at us, and then we spend even more money getting rid of them. And the fact of the matter is we now have at least 2 or 3 generations since the plantations of very highly qualified individuals who I think would very much like to come home, and not as under the usual circumstances, which finds our children coming home when their parents need to be taken care of. So let's try to actively bring them back, integrate them into our community, because we have an opportunity that really did not exist before. So I'll move on to questions later, but thank you so much for having me.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Chris. And we'll move on to opening remarks from Noel next, please.
Aloha, everybody. Hope you can hear me okay. Yeah, I'm honored to be part of this panel, and I hope that I can contribute not only here, but also beyond this event. Back in 2004, after 5 years at eBay, I announced to my manager that I would be leaving the company, and my inspiration was to live a more balanced life here in Hawaii. As luck would have it, I was given the opportunity to work remotely for a few months in order to get a new manager in place. And those few months turned into 15 years with the company. I have a very eclectic background. My career has been a journey of discovery and learning. I've had the opportunity to work in physical therapy and medical lab sciences, business systems analysis, e-commerce solutions, CRM, product management and management. And each of these experiences was meaningful and contributed incrementally to later ones. I share this because I believe that this process of incremental reinvention is very relevant to our conversation today. COVID has no doubt created significant hardships for all of us and will have lasting impact. But there is, as Chris had mentioned or suggested, there is a silver lining. It's created this opportunity for us to create a more sustainable and diversified economy. And also it's put a spotlight on changes that are long overdue. An example would be tourism, right? Reinventing tourism. It's also created the optimal environment for change. As Chris mentioned, employers and workers have now discovered the viability and advantages of remote work. We're also learning the different types of technology and processes that are required for this type of work. And it's not just the workers and the employers, students, parents. Many people have been exposed to virtual collaboration. Zoom is a commonplace now, and are in many ways learning what's required for remote work. So we have this context, and on top of this, we have the opportunity to layer many other opportunities, including what we're talking about today, which is in the software realm. But I want to emphasize, well, one point I'd like to make is that while we do have this, this vision of this new space, this new industry with regard to software development, for example, I think we have the opportunity to also reinvent the existing ones with the same technology. It doesn't matter if it's renewable energy, agriculture, all these different spaces that we're all uniquely equipped to support here on the island. I think all of these things could be reinvented, made more relevant, and made more effective for the community in terms of the community, in terms of the economy, building the economy. So I guess one of the themes I'd like to share during this conversation, or here during this conversation, is the opportunity for software development to also create the opportunity to reinvent the various industries that we have today. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. And our final panelist, we will now segue to Austin. If you can unmute and provide your opening remarks, please.
Okay, I'll start the timer too. So I'm extremely honored to be allowed to participate in this discussion. I think that what's being discussed here today is very important. So what was omitted from my little bio is that ever since 2010, I've been living in Hilo. My wife, whom I met on the mainland when we were both at school, grew up in Mililani and wanted very desperately to move back to the islands after I had left my first startup in California, having before that worked at Apple as a project manager. And since moving to Hilo, I maintained sort of that connection with Silicon Valley and founded or co-founded a number of startups that were both predominantly local in the case of companies like Quick Events, or ones that were predominantly on the mainland like Archive.bg and Twitch. So my entire career at Twitch was actually spent working remotely from Hilo, and I took a real acute interest in why I was able to take advantage of this enormous opportunity for remote work, essentially like arbitraging the labor market, having a high-paying Silicon Valley job, and yet living, down on Kilauea Ave for $750 a month, and why other people locally couldn't take advantage of this as well. Hilo has a computer science program; it's actually quite good. A number of those people have gone on to high-paying jobs at Microsoft, but all of them have had to leave their homes, and none of them wanted to do that. Also, Twitch being a platform for creatives, I saw that there's an enormous opportunity for us to create other information or cultural products to distribute live in the case of Twitch, but in other formats as well. And that could be a major export. I agree, like everyone else here, that software and anything that can be sent down the wires, any sort of information product, are the best exports for Hawaii. They can be sent to the corners of the globe for minimal cost. They don't need to be irradiated in order to be consumed like papayas do. So I'm going to agree with everyone there that is what we want to do, that there are enormous potentials there. Having studied why these opportunities aren't currently being leveraged by people in the community, I see that there are a lot of issues with access to mentorship, access to instruction, access to high-speed internet, access to creative technology, access to investment. All of these things are necessary if we want to do more than just enable the success of a few individuals. There are some exceptional local individuals who are able to overcome some of the limitations in access to leverage these technologies to become successful. But if we want whole communities in Hawaii to be successful, we need to really address all of those different kinds of access. And I'm especially concerned about access when it comes to neighbor islands and the internet and our very fragile internet infrastructure. And even, we have had many new cable landings in 2017 and 2018 to Hawaii that has increased our bandwidth. But I think about the future and I see no currently scheduled cable landings. And I think about the increasing bandwidth requirements, especially if we want to enable creative professionals to send 4K video to the mainland. And so those are sorts of things that keep me up at night. And I've talked to Bert Lum about these as well. So some things that Bert says I may be saying as well, but I also have a perspective on sort of the software development and engineering management side of things. So I'm excited for this conversation.
Excellent. Thank you all. Thank you to all of our panelists for getting us started with your opening remarks. And for those of you joining us as participants today, we're going to ask a series of questions that have been prepared in advance. And for many of you that have joined us with other panels, some of the questions may be similar because we're trying to get to a point of action and goals. And towards the end of our session today, we will be opening it up to questions from participants. So if you'd like to in advance, drop a question in the chat. We'll get to that, or you'll have an opportunity to unmute yourself and ask the question directly also. For our panelists, we will ask a series of questions and feel free to jump in if the question resonates with you. If you have something particularly of interest that you'd like to share, you don't have to provide an answer to each question, and we'll just keep moving along. We have several questions that we'd like to get to before we open it up to the participants. In providing responses, if you can try to limit your responses to about 2 minutes, just so we can keep the conversation going and get through as many of our questions as possible this morning. And so I will kick us off with our prepared questions. And many of you have already touched on some of this. So this is a question, if you have any more to add, please go ahead and unmute here. Our first question: in what ways do you see the software development and creative media as an industry contributing to a more vibrant Hawaii? So again, if you have anything more that you'd like to add to this particular question.
Well, I would like to add to my opening remarks, on which I mostly touched on prosperity, which is one of the principles, one of the goals of Vibrant Hawaii, but there's also more to it. There's the culture and there's the native intelligence. And by being able to have content and have people who control and create technology that are from here is how we can also export our values and what's important to us and what we look like here in Hawaii, and what we believe in, and maybe a little more aloha can be injected in the global narrative. So that is my comment.
I'll just add, I'm not a software person really. I'm a, like I said, film and television, so I'm more content. And Austin, I noticed you were at Twitch. Kevin Lin is a friend of mine. I know he just retired from Twitch. He's actually helping me on our esports efforts at UH. We did the initial 12 gaming stations for the Manoa campus, and they're actually competing with other schools now on Twitch. And when our new building opens, we actually have 24 stations, full arena, places for audio, for tournaments and fans and everything, and shoutcasting. But if you don't know, esports is very much a driver. It's the biggest, fastest growing sport in the world. And for many campuses, it is a huge driver for enrollment and for marketing purposes. And it's an example of a platform. Like I was saying, like earlier, we didn't have a lot of platforms, and now we do. I'm not a gamer, but I do love all the DJs that they have on Twitch. It's a platform that really helps to connect the world. And it's something, again, that it's not something you have to pay for. And it's something that can make a lot of money for schools and stuff. So it's an example of why I always say film is one aspect of what we do. The program at Chancellor's School actually was started by a woman named Violet Murakami, and it well predates the efforts that we've done here at the system level, though we were, so creative media, and Violet used to talk about all of the employment that comes to our students because of the kind of training they get. And in fact, we don't have a studio here, we don't have a game studio, we don't have an animation studio here, but creative media is something that is in all aspects of our lives. And it's so you could be at KTA, you could be at the Nanilua Hotel, and basically employers are looking for those students who can create apps for smartphones, can help market themselves virally by being their in-house videographers, by being their social media directors. And a lot of what our students are doing, particularly the West Oahu campuses, they are, like, say, the social media director for the Kroc Center or for BMW Hawaii or for Target here in Hawaii. And so that's the kind of employment that is beyond the usual traditional film and television.
Is it appropriate to ask a question here? Chris, I'm wondering if esports, I'm very curious about this. It's kind of, it's past a generation about that. And is there any educational value in esports, or is it purely entertainment?
I think Austin, since Austin worked for Twitch, he can maybe address that. But no, it is not just for entertainment, but it is, they don't like to call it athletics because of the compensation issues that go on in it. I think we call them competitors. But there is absolutely a value chain in terms of education, because we're not just allowing them to play games, we want them to create games. So a lot of what we do on some of the campuses, particularly at the Manoa campus, but also the West Oahu campus, is we are teaching video game development. And so that goes hand in hand with their constant interest in gaming. But there is no question that it is what captivates today's generations.
I'll hop in and say something there. Clearly Twitch has a lot to say about the positive effects of games, in terms of creating community, building drive, getting people interested in things and serious about things. I wouldn't see what's going on in esports these are not entertainment sort of games. It's entertaining for the spectators. It is enormous amount of work and grueling exercise and practice for the people who actually compete in it. I think esports revenues are projected to be 1.78 billion or something like that next year. It's an enormous growing industry, and it's the closest thing is to athletics. The way that the people who are actively engaged in esports play games is not the way that you and I sit on the bus and play Tetris. It's quite a bit different. So it's there are the sort of positives that you get out of being an extremely accomplished athlete and having that dedication to purpose and team and sportsmanship and team building. Those things are there in esports just as they are in traditional sports. They're actually quite similar in that regard. Whether they interest people in technology, the technology underlying those games or not, that's something obviously that Chris's program is helping to inculcate. Not all programs do that. And I've seen a number of schools that have esports programs now. Iolani just built this nice, it's a room sort of within their huge maker lab that is dedicated to esports. And they're, I think, fielding an esports team. Of course, you're not going to see stuff like that in most of the public schools. They have not been able to participate in this in the same way that other places have. So that's one aspect of it. I wanted to briefly comment on just the obvious implications of making software remotely, and that it is not particularly difficult to do, and that Silicon Valley companies have realized that telepresence isn't so much of an issue anymore because everything is coordinated through Google Calendars and everything. Everyone has a Chromebox in every single meeting room. So convening a meeting with someone who's remote or people who are on disparate corners of the earth along with an on-site team is not really that difficult. Our collaboration tools are all internet based. Everyone uses some Git-based collaboration for software development. Like there are no roadblocks there. The only roadblocks are convincing people that someone in Hawaii is as qualified a candidate as someone elsewhere, and ensuring that that person has consistent internet access so that they don't have unexplained disappearances, which are fatal. You can forget all about someone being remote so long as there are no connectivity issues. If there are connectivity issues, suddenly the issue of them being remote is brought forward, and that becomes an issue. So I was lucky that during my tenure at Twitch, I didn't have too many huge, internet outages that prevented me from actually being able to do my job and manage a team of 8 people in San Francisco while being a large head on a 65-inch, television. And that's one of the reasons why I'm concerned, especially about access in neighbor islands where the infrastructure is limited and frail. And because really the neighbor islands where these sorts of opportunities are best, because there are fewer local opportunities for people to take advantage of. So they have the most to gain, but also the greatest barriers to being able to leverage those opportunities.
Austin, I'd like to add to that, just reflecting on my experience. I mentioned 2004, I moved over here, and a few years after that, during a business trip to Salt Lake City, folks learned that I actually was working remotely for the first time, right? So for them, there was no difference. It was as if I was working from the headquarters in San Jose. So it's, like you indicated, with the right technology, broadband access, and all the collaboration tools that already exist, it doesn't really matter where you're at. And we did have developers who were in China and India, for example, and they were able to collaborate with product managers and other development teams, in the U.S. So the practice is there, the precedent is there. It's been done for many years now. The question is, what is the opportunity to make it happen here? And it's not like it hasn't happened. Like you're an example, I'm an example. There are these individuals who have made it happen. And the question is, how do we make that? How do we scale that? How do we get that process and know-how and awareness out there so that this ecosystem can be created, right? So it's not impossible. It's been done many times over.
Wonderful. So one of the themes that I've heard so far is access and access to a variety of things. We are very fortunate this morning to have Chancellor Solomsas with us, because one of the sub streams for the education stream that she chairs is equitable access to education. So some of what has already come up this morning is similar to what has been coming up in this substream, but Chancellor is actually going to be asking our next question.
My apologies for so engrossed to the topics. So wanted to definitely ask, and I think several of you have already alluded, particularly infrastructure, but what other vulnerabilities and challenges exist within our work, and how can we strengthen it?
So I'd like to speak to what I think is the greatest challenge to our ability to develop more of this industry here, which is education. And well, personally, I started programming with my dad when I was 10 or 11. And being able to program and understanding and getting a computer to do what you need is a little bit like a foreign language. Learning English or Spanish or Mandarin, computer science is very similar. And when you get to be exposed early, you have an incredible advantage. I'd be curious to see how old Austin was when he started, or Noel. And I would suspect that it might have been quite young as well. But finishing, let's pose the question. And finishing my point here, I think that here in Hawaii, we need to make sure we have a great computer science education in the K-12 curriculum, because if we do not have that, then it doesn't matter how well we invest in workforce development. We have a body of students who have too high a step to go to be able to achieve these types of education and careers. We also, the earlier you start, you can beat the stereotypes. So women, minorities besides Asian and white people are notoriously not well represented in computer science. And when those stereotypes start being established is in middle school. What am I going to do? What club am I going to participate into? Which club are my friends participating into? What are they going to think of me? So if you get students, very young students in first, second, third grade to explore with age-appropriate computer science, which is quite well done and quite accessible and fun and free with so many online tools nowadays, it can help breaking those stereotypes and those barriers and bring more types of workers to this industry.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, obviously. You know, one of the things about when I started this program is I actually didn't want to put it into the traditional humanities. I wanted to put it into computer science because I told everybody 20 years ago, I said, you know, film is a dying medium, but storytelling is not. And the way that we capture and then distribute those stories is going to change dramatically, but it's going to happen because of computers. I think it's appropriate that they actually do have the film school in humanities. It's also the largest program at the Manoa in arts and humanities. It's called something else now at the Manoa campus. But at the same time, with the advent of the arrival of a professor named Jason Lee from Chicago, we were able to, who went to ICS, Information Computer Science, and we were able to work directly with him and help support his efforts at what we call computational media. It's not a term that existed before, but it's essentially the nexus between storytelling, art, science, coding. And basically half his classes are made up of the creative media kids and half the classes are made up of the ICS or the engineering kids. And together, they are able to create games or original software and tell stories visually and stuff. And I think it's important to have both sides of that equation going on. That is extended in particular to Hawaii, to UH Hilo, where we've done a number of data visualization projects. We put in the cyber canoe system there. While the program at Hawaii CC Hilo at the community college has been more production oriented, but they are now collaborating in ways that we think are terrific. So for example, most of the equipment that people use in the production classes is actually checked out of the library at Hilo, at the Hilo campus. And they're so close together. So I think that sort of ability to work together is really key to all of this. And you have to find this kind of breaking down of silos in order to deliver what the marketplace is looking for.
I love that message of breaking down these sort of arbitrary barriers between disciplines that all have similar skills and similar potentials. And I felt like Carolyn was addressing me when she said, I wonder how young Austin was when he started programming. Well, interestingly, and perhaps applicable to this discussion, I started programming in Logo on an Apple II when I was in second grade. And this is applicable to this discussion because I went to school in Nashville, Tennessee. I grew up from birth to age 12, I was in Nashville, Tennessee, which was not known at that time or at this time for having an exceptional public school system. And they were also trying to find ways to develop technology, sort of the technology economy locally and start with kids young. That seemed like the right thing to do. When they let us into the computer lab, they told us that they had not received any training in how to use any of these computers. So they were just going to lock us in there and see what happened. And we figured out Logo, and we figured out, Apple DOS, and we figured out Apple's weird, BASIC, and from manuals and things, and one kid trying something and it drew a line. And so that's led me throughout my life to believe in exposure and access as being the primary things that kids need to have, and as young as possible and as broadly as possible. They need to have an experience of of the technology and of interacting with it and learning from each other and having it be a social thing. That's what I think is really determinant when it comes to you know, whether or not you're going to pursue that field. Was it fun for you and your friends to do it when you were 8? You know, if it was, that's a viable, you know, avenue for you, and you're going to consider that. And so, you know, from an educational standpoint, exposure would be my #1 priority. I think that in terms of making technology appealing, not just as for consumption of content, but for creation of content, there's so much good work that's been there. MIT's Scratch, Microsoft's MakeCode, Circuit Python, Fritzing. I could, off the top of my head, I could come up with 100 wonderful places to begin your journey in electrical engineering and computer science and creating games and all these things. And you just need to be exposed to one of them with your friends and have a good time. That would be my position.
I've seen some questions about time zones. And I know Noel was talking earlier about China and India. You know, Hawaii at one time was, you know, it will always be the most geographically isolated populated place in the world. But what's different is while we used to be in the middle of nowhere, now we're in the middle of everywhere, particularly with the pivot to Asia. And so I do a fair amount of stuff with China, and I can start doing that at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, which means it's only 5 or 6 p.m. in Los Angeles, which means it's not even midnight in New York. And that's an advantage that no other place can offer. And it's something that, again, we have to take advantage of. In terms of what's happening in education particularly in the public schools, someone asked a question about faculty and stuff, and I've always been an advocate for trying to get creative media as an actual certificate in the education degrees that we hand out, because I've done, at one point, this is about 10 years ago, but I got some R money or something like that, and I decided to put, to bootstrap 10 creative media programs in middle schools on every island. I think we did Konawaena on the Big Island. By the way, Waiakea High School in particular, but also Hilo High, they have turned out as many entrepreneurs as anybody else in this state. So I always say there's something in the water in Hilo in particular that has created all of my genius friends come from those high schools. And what was interesting to me is when because I actually chose a lot of at-risk schools, like here on Oahu, I went to literally the reform school in Kailua, and I went to to Stevenson and stuff like that. And I always found that the kids gravitated and were digital warriors, and the faculty were terrified of the technology. And I think we've all heard stories about like the DOE buying lots of iPads for faculty and everything, and they just sit in boxes because they don't know what to do with them. So I do think that there has to be this education of our educators to keep up with their students. And, but fortunately, everybody's starting to come a little bit more on the same generations, right? So that the teachers today have grown up as digital warriors themselves.
That's a perfect segue into our next question. Kind of springboarding off of what Carolyn and Stewart were talking about on exposure. I'm a proud member of the Zonta Club of Hilo, and their mission is to empower women and girls through service and advocacy. One of the service projects was started almost a decade ago, and it's called the Amelia Earhart Girls in Engineering Day. And the focus was to expose girls in 7th through 8th grade to STEM, because we found that they were severely underrepresented in those industries. And so it's a day-long workshop for girls and their parents to come and do things like build robots, fly drones, do different types of chemistry experiments. And we've found that many of these girls end up pursuing Science Academy and STEM Academy and just having a lot of great interest because of this initial exposure. I'm a huge fan of what Purple Maya does, going into economically disenfranchised communities and teaching kids how to code, and that being their ticket out of poverty. So I'm just curious, panelists, what opportunities exist currently here in the islands that we can increase exposure to our kids around? And, where are ways that we can kind of grow this so that more folks have opportunities across the islands?
Ashley, thanks for raising the opportunity around STEM related groups, and I think that I just wanted to expound on that. I think that's a perfect opportunity for our community to offer these opportunities for our youth to be exposed to these different fields. And I meant to add earlier that I'll admit that I am not a software person, so I don't code. I am a product manager, and the role that I play in the company that I work for was mainly this interface between business and our software development teams. And the essence of this role is problem solving. It's really understanding, what the issues are that you're trying to solve, the root causes for those problems, identifying possible solutions, testing those solutions, and executing, right? And the essence of this can be found in quite a few of these STEM groups that are sprinkled across the island. One opportunity I think might be for this team or a team to coordinate or sort of facilitate the conversation across these different groups. And the value there might be economies of scale, right? There could be best practice sharing, there could be sharing of resources, there could be, coordination of programs throughout the year. So it's not, it's actually spread throughout the year. So I think there's an opportunity there to nurture these programs, these groups that are already providing the benefit to the community, to our youth, and creating more impact, allowing them to have a bigger impact by virtue of that organization.
So I want to, if I can, quickly plug Malachi Foundation, which I should full disclosure say I'm a board member of. But Malachi Foundation runs this annual summer camp that provides, it's basically an entrepreneurship workshop and boot camp for Hawaii high school students exclusively. It used to be more of a technology focus. It was the first year it was billed as a hacker camp. I'm very interested in sort of the development of technology skills. I pushed it more toward the development of lean startup product management and basically getting your ideas off the ground skills so that it could be part of a multi-step process that sort of begins with your after school club, takes you to a summer program with us, and then takes you into a community investment program with Purple Maya. We have partnered with Purple Maya. They have sponsored students in our program. We have put students into their programs. We have a close relationship with them. We've had Malachi Startup Camp alumni go into High Plan and win the Student High Plan Award. And 8 out of the 10 finalists for Purple Maya's Kipuka Innovation Prize this year were Malachi alumni. So we're trying to mint entrepreneurs as quickly as we can. And one of the things that Malachi does is that it pairs people from across the spectrum socioeconomically and educationally. We have homeschool students from Kauai with Iolani students who've taken Iolani has an app development class you can take in high school. Blows my mind anyway, but we'll pair someone who just came out of the Lo'i with someone else who was homeschooled, with someone who took that class from Iolani. We'll turn them into a 3-person startup, and we'll encourage them to go through the process and work their way up to investment. And so programs like this, I think, are important, but also making sure that there has to be this unbroken chain of opportunities, of ropes that are thrown down to you so you can climb your way up, starting from your K through 12, in the classroom, out of the classroom, and then moving into after school activities, moving into summer activities, moving into the investment program, liftoff program at UH, moving into postgraduate studies, and moving into the other investment opportunities through local venture firms, of which there are too few. And we also need to get California venture firms more interested in Hawaii. We do have a number of Y Combinator alums from Hawaii who try to hook people up, but we need a more formal relationship with Silicon Valley venture capital and just more capital in general, because we can get people so close. I get people ready, the pitch in hand, but I need the investment side. I need the buy side there as well to really make this whole process work.
Thank you, Austin. I am a big fan of Malachi. I think you guys are doing wonderful work. And when you're talking about throwing ropes and throwing a lot of ropes, I just like the metaphor and the image. And I would like to speak about one of the few ropes that I see I could be throwing right now. By the way, when I'm a retired computer engineer and I had never been a teacher, but I slowly got involved in my kids' school, and I eventually became a computer science teacher in the school because I felt that it was needed and it was so easy to do and there was such opportunity. But I realized it's just me. There's not enough reach by just me, and we need to be able to scale this effort. So I'm thinking a very easy opportunity would be for people like me, not just me, but Silicon Valley expats to go into the programs that train the teachers at Hilo maybe, and just give that exposure. It doesn't need to take long. It doesn't need to be a full class, but just a few sessions maybe with our future teachers, and show them the potential and show them, wow, look at what my student did. There's that butterfly in this beautiful decor that flaps its wing, and it's all made with code. And you can use that as a tool, just like a pencil and a notebook, to support any aspects of your curriculum. So I would love for the chance to be able to bring this and to strike the imagination of our young teachers. And I think it probably is just a matter if Julie can introduce me and people like me to the right people. I think we could make quite a lot of progress that way.
Yeah, I just, by the way, I want to say thank you for mentioning Iolani so much, because I'm a graduate. But
I take it all back.
Actually, Gabriel, who runs that whole program, was a Manoa ACM student. And then he came and saw what we were doing with Esports at the Manoa campus, which is the only one that is actually competing with other schools at this point. And then he went back and set up the program at Iolani. I think Iolani's been very progressive about this. But again, I think YK is just as progressive about this. I think education is largely aspirational. And if you're only giving kids holding out the opportunity to pour plantation iced tea in a hotel, a lot of kids decide, why am I going to school? But if you're giving them the opportunity to actually change their world and our world, I think it's something that is actually much more accessible than it used to be. And as we talk about bringing the kids together, the coders and the designers and the storytellers. One of the things that we did with Jason Lee was help him get his Lava Lab up and running at the Manoa campus, which is basically their entrepreneur sandbox. And we've worked with him to do the same for Hilo. And at the West of Wild campus, when the new building opens, we will have a new 1,300 square foot emerging media space in which we've already commissioned from Native Hawaiian graduate students at Manoa to create the projection technology. If any of you are familiar with what's happening in Japan with Team Lab Borderless and a lot of these art museums you see, it's a virtual environment that you don't have to wear glasses for. So you have this projection technology, you use the Connect technology from gaming to make it interactive, it has audio, and we will launch that facility with a virtual Hawaiian forest, which will actually, because it's filled with flora and fauna, Native Hawaiian flora and fauna, it on the control system will teach you the language and help to teach the language as well. In addition to that, and I think this is the first for any UH campus, we've included essentially an accelerator for student-run companies in the building, so that when students come up with their original IP and their software and stuff, and they want to start their companies, they have a space where that's not their garage, not their bedroom, that they can actually interact with potential investors, but also other students, and build their companies and help them get started. So that's another thing that we put into this building to really underscore the need for all of us to be entrepreneurs when it's appropriate, and just give them that opportunity.
So I really like the ideas that are coming forward in, and we've already started talking a little bit about the education and workforce. piece, which is one of our next questions. I'm going to actually combine two questions here. We had a question regarding COVID, and we had a question regarding education and workforce development. And the ideas that are coming out are great, in which we're creating physical spaces. But earlier on the call, we did mention, I did hear where someone mentioned, don't come back to the office until 2022. So in the meantime, how is it that we can address the education and workforce pieces that you are already starting to mention here in a COVID world, through the lens of health and safety, and knowing that there also is a real digital divide that exists based on the comments of access that were already brought up in this conversation?
I don't know if I'm going to answer your question, Farah, but I'd like to invite everybody to imagine where we would be now in the middle of COVID if we hadn't had all these amazing tools. Like 20 years ago, we didn't have the internet the way it was. We didn't have Zoom. 2 years ago, we didn't have Zoom. So I think that COVID highlights the case for computer science as an indispensable tool, whereas it does leave a lot of people behind, and we need to bring those people in. If it weren't for technology, we would all be left behind.
I think that,
Yeah.
sorry, go ahead, Austin.
No, please.
Yeah, no, I think that the access concern is, obviously a significant one, right? And we know that with CARES funding, we have mobile Wi-Fi that that is enabling telehealth and even education. I think some solutions like that may not be exactly like that. We need to explore to ensure that that the access is not an issue. If we're truly wanting to have this be equitable and accessible to all. And it's not an impossible problem. I think the technology is there. I think it's more of perhaps a funding challenge, something that obviously has a solution to it as well. The other thing that might be interesting is to understand that it may be advantageous to have to position the need to be able to communicate in this manner, right? Remotely, virtually, et cetera. Not just as a means to get the education that is needed now, but also to establish the skills that are going to be valuable moving forward, because the world has changed, right? With the climate crisis, with the downturn of tourism as a result of COVID, there will be more hesitation to get on a plane and or be in a space where the employer is, and we've already heard many examples here that's changed. So rather than making it a detriment or a negative, it's actually a positive, framing it so that this is a way to not only get what you need in the immediate, which is the education, but also to gather the skills and learn the skills that are going to be necessary for the future.
The digital divide here that suddenly has essentially created even more disparate opportunities to people depending on where they live, who they are, who their parents are, spooks me. It makes me really concerned, because I was worried about people on neighbor islands and in communities on the west side of Oahu and so forth before all this happened, because they'd show up in Malachi and it was clear that they had a very different experience, not just educationally, but in their lives in terms of what they thought was possible for themselves. And now I imagine, the 75% of kids that the principal of KL Elementary told me were living in poverty last time I spoke there, being almost entirely cut off, not just from their education, but from each other, it's wonderful that we do have the technology that can overcome a lot of these things. How do we democratize that technology? Bert Lund was on here, you said recently. I don't know if you talked about the Hawaii Broadband Strategic Plan for 2020 that was just released. It does go into some of the implications of COVID, especially on communities that have less access. But the scary thing in there is that they don't expect to have funds to do anything about those in 2021. They expect budget shortfalls. They're hopeful that they'll be able to execute on certain aspects of the 2020 strategic plan in 2022. Meanwhile, that's what, 2 years of falling behind? I mean, it's terrifying. I think that we need to say in the state of Hawaii that access to high-speed internet is a right, and that you should have it, and we should figure out how to get it to you. And I don't know how much it's going to cost. I can tell you that Starlink could possibly support it. It doesn't currently because of our location, but I think that that satellite internet is generally, if you read the broadband report, they don't really think satellite internet is a possible game changer here because they're worried about the latency issues with traditional satellite internet. That is not a problem so much with SpaceX's Starlink. And I wonder if some sort of collaboration between SpaceX and our government might make it possible to actually provide high-speed internet to everyone in a shorter time frame. And I wish I really understood that technology super well as all of the governmental issues that are behind such a partnership and such an initiative. But I know that from an outcome standpoint, I want those kids to have broadband now, not maybe in 2021.
Yeah, we stay in touch with all the programs that we support. We're actually supporting 17 programs on 10 campuses, and we had them all write up what it was like to go into COVID and go into our first Zoom semester. We're, basically in our second Zoom semester at this point, and now we're going to have a third Zoom semester. And it was interesting that, you had students at some, particularly at the community colleges, who had no broadband access, and they would drive their cars and sit in the parking lot at one of the campuses just so they could access the Wi-Fi that was available at the school. Faculty had to adapt to teaching. They had a choice of basically being live on the internet or recording things either on La Lima or on YouTube, and then teach the lessons that way, so that kids could, when you could get to your internet, it was available, they could access the lessons and everything like that. So everybody's definitely had to adapt. And there's no question that we do have this digital divide issue. On the other hand, in the issue, in terms of COVID, I tend to subscribe to the idea that you should never waste a crisis. And COVID is definitely a crisis, but it's a crisis that I think there are things coming out of it because of it. As I said, it's given us a chance to re-examine the world in which we live. And the number one thing I think for Hawaii was that when we were topping out like 10 million tourists a year, and everyone realized we don't have the carrying capacity for that, because we had the same number of hotels as we had when we had 7 million tourists a year. And what was happening, of course, is everybody was going to Airbnbs and changing the texture and quality of our neighborhoods. And that was not something that people wanted to endure. So it's given us this reset and given us an opportunity to rethink how we approach things. And while we do have those latency issues, I mean, the gamers are always, we have this big latency issue with the League of Legends and stuff. I think the servers are in Chicago or something like that. And we do try to give the kids the best possible connectivity so they don't have to Jedi magic their way into competing against other kids. I still think that I see overall an opportunity in this, but the budget issue is an issue. I mean, the fact that we're going to be cutting things here and there, it's going to be very challenging. And I hope we don't cut the wrong things. I'm going beyond my 2 minutes, but I did want to say a little bit about film and television, because, film and television often comes up in the context of tax credits and should we be doing that here in Hawaii and stuff. And, a lot of people have tried a lot of diversification of our society, but I think the one that has been a consistent player since Thomas Edison came here in 1906 and did his original films is film and television. And Act 88, which is the tax credit bill that sometimes gets inappropriate negative coverage. Until we had that, which I think was 2006, we never had a year over $100 million in direct spend. Direct spend, I mean, they actually spent the money here. After that, we had a steady climb to 2019 or 2018, where we got to $480 million in direct spend, which is $1 billion in economic activity. The way the credit works is you actually have to spend the money, turn in the receipts, and then you get your credit back. It's 25% on the Big Island, other neighbor islands is 20% on Oahu. That was the year we capped it. And when we capped it in 2019, which is the last apples to apples year we can go to, we went from $480 million. For the first time, we went backwards. We went to about 390 since COVID started, actually, and things settled down a little bit, I actually did a op-ed about how we should take advantage of it because of our low numbers and what we could do with our hotels that we're not doing right now. So on Maui, there are two shows that have taken over entire resort hotels. One is the Andaz. It's the sort of infamous Temptation Island. People don't like it, but it's a reality show. The other is HBO is taking over one of the other hotel complexes, and they create these COVID bubbles because this industry more than any other is very safe because they have the ability to spend on it. They just wrapped the latest Jurassic Park in London. They did 40,000 COVID tests during the making of that film. The unions have created a protocol book that is over 80 pages long. People work in little pods. So since this started, actually, Magnum's now been shooting, I think, for 2 months. They've had some false positives, but nothing has shut them down. They have not actual cases. Those two shows are on Maui. There's a new version of Doogie Howser, which is called Doogie Kamealoha, which is going to be for Disney Plus, and they are going to do 10 episodes here on Oahu in the spring. So that's going to be shooting. There's also an 8-episode Amazon version of a movie that I was at my studio called I Know What You Did Last Summer, and there's other features looking at here. But the cap on the tax credit is really inhibiting people saying, are we actually going to be able to access it? Because it's already been blown through every year and it's been rolling over year after year. And it's really was, in my thinking, a problem, a solution in search of a problem. And I hope that we can remove that. And the other thing we're working on is building up our infrastructure because we have no studio complex here. And so we should be a multi-billion-dollar industry because we have been able to create a relatively low numbers to the world, like Vancouver has, not as good as New Zealand, but not anything like what you'll find in Georgia these days. So, I hope that we don't give up on that because we sort of see those tax credits as kind of low-hanging fruit or something.
Thanks, Chris. And you've actually taken us to our last question. Outside of the government making really strategic investments as laid out in the broadband strategy, what are some other ways that you think government can better support and grow each of your respective industries? And I say that because we're on the cusp of a new legislative session. We're going to have 2 new mayors, one for Hawaiʻi Island and one for Honolulu. So not only are people seeing opportunities to make some progress, but really an obligation for us to be doing things differently.
For my respective industry, I know that the DOE in 2018 has mandated computer science education in schools and funded it with $500,000. It is my understanding that they have not yet begun the work of following up on this and find out where did this money go, which school received it, how many teachers got trained. So I think a great step would be to find out what happened, what was accomplished with this $500,000, and then see if more can be done and more funding can be applied to this effort.
I have this dream that the state and county could buy local for all of their software and IT needs, create a local software team, and build that, not just build, great software to support, our various, state branches locally, but also to build up some real expertise in some people locally and have a real success story to point to about people writing software sort of in a for us, by us context, and having those people have a story to tell to people at schools throughout the state to say, hey, we do real stuff, we deliver it to real people, we do it locally, we grew up here, we trained here. how much of an impact that would have, I'm not certain, but I've always wanted to have a story like that to point to. And I think that it could be an interesting place to start. Because we talk about self-sufficiency in a lot of things. I'd like to think about, you know, in my mind, we could have our own Linux, distribution that we run state things on. I know there are a lot of problems to such a thing as that, but with actual, first-class support for Hawaiian language, currently first-class Hawaiian language support is only really kind of supported on Apple products, which are kind of expensive, not really used right now anyway, in that context. But it's a dream.
Again, I'm hoping we get rid of the credit. I'm hoping that we are able to build an actual studio complex so that we can increase our infrastructure, because a lot of people would like to stay here longer, and all the big shows that come here like Jumanji or Jurassic Park or Pirates of the Caribbean, there's no place for them to shoot. Actually, on the Doogie Howser show, the Doogie Kamealoha show, they need to build a hospital set, and they need to build a interior of a house, and there's no place to go because Magnum is using up all the facilities that, such as they are here on Oahu. I just say to this group that we've been able to send them to somewhere on one of the UH assets. I think they're going to actually involve UH in it and stuff like that. But that's the kind of thinking that we sort of have to have. And in general, I think that I wish the government would take advantage of this crisis and bring our kids home, because we all know there are certain tax implications. The companies are already deciding, well, you're going to be this much less money you're going to be paid if you go work there. But even with that deduction, it's still higher than any of the salaries here in Hawaii. And lots of people would love to bring their families home to Hawaii. I will say this, I know a lot of people in my industry, in the tech industry in general, and they are moving here already. If you look at what's happening with home values here in Hawaii, what's driving it is local, but a lot of it, I have a lot of friends from California, from the West Coast, and they don't think, they think this is the place to be, and now their companies are allowing them to do this. So we really should make this equally available to the folks, all the kids that we sent away, or as I say, invested in the mainland, and bring them back.
Ashley, I'd like to add, and pardon me if this is already what this organization is about, or what may already exist in the county, but as we spoke today, it is very clear that this is a large system problem or opportunity, maybe a better word, and that there is an interplay between policy, infrastructure, local business, mentors and organizations that encourage STEM, the university. There's all these different entities that in one way or another are contributing to this possible solution, right, that we're all looking at. And there's a need for some structure around all of that. And if Vibrant Hawaii is facilitating that, that's great. But I think that's going to be an important play for this. And I'm not sure what role local government will have, but ensuring that it's documented, it's nurtured, and it's tuned over time is going to be important for this ecosystem to be created. So I guess the question would be, is that what this group is accomplishing or attempting to accomplish, the creation of that and the management of that ecosystem?
Short answer is yes, and we're trying to achieve that through our version of the CEDS action plan.
Okay.
Recognizing that everybody that is participating is rowing in their own canoe, and we are doing so, rowing in the same direction, essentially. But yeah, we want to make sure everybody's on the same page so that we're not working in different silos as we usually do. We're at 10:30, but I have to ask, any of you involved in the Kupu Aina Core or Aloha Connects innovation program, and do you see value in that? Do you see value in upskilling many of our residents who were working in hospitality and service industries and helping them to pivot and to learn skill sets in this particular industry? And do you think a Job Corps is something that our county and state government should be investing in?
So I will respond and say that as part of my work with the Success Factory, we have hired a couple of folks. We have a web designer and also a marketing intern through Aloha Connect. And that's worked out very well. It's given them the opportunity to provide value, but also to gain experiences. And to answer your question, I think, I'm not sure about the logistics and all the mechanics behind it, but I feel like it's a very important manner in which we can facilitate that connection between people in need with the skills, or the desire to gain the skills, with organizations that have the opportunity.
Similarly, we have used CARES money with the Resiliency Hub of Vibrant Hawaii to train 9 apprentices who are receiving a salary to learn how to use 3D printers, maintain 3D printers, build, assemble them from kits, and then teach young children how to use this technology. This is just one example of what we could do as far as continuing education with mentorship and teaming up of experienced people with people that are ready to retool and learn new skills. But the great opportunity of the CARES funding made that available. And I'm just hoping for more to come so we can restart this effort, if not continue it.
All right, recognizing that we are at the 10:32 mark here, and I'm just seeing a comment in the chat from Tamia. Would internships for high school and recent graduates be something worth investing in? All right, so that is a great question for us to go straight to closing remarks. And if you can find a way to weave in a response to the last question that has been popped into the chat, feel free to take that opportunity. We're just like we provided opportunity for opening remarks. We're going to do one more round for everyone to share any final thoughts that they would like regarding today's panel. And for this, we'll go in reverse order. And so Austin, if you can please get us started here.
So I think in closing, I think we all recognize enormous opportunities available to people, not just in software, but in other creative fields that can deliver their content electronically to make a high value product locally that will boost their own personal lives and improve their communities. And I think we all recognize that there are a lot of things that are obstacles to that. Across everything from policy to attitudes to education to everything. You know, this question about internships, when I think about internships, I think about the possibility for virtual internships at mainland firms that are well compensated. If we could have some way to have good relationships with mainland firms that would enable us to, you know, get our keiki connected. Because with the rise of remote work throughout the industry, remote internships are a thing as well. And that could provide a new source of opportunity that previously hasn't been leveraged. I would be interested in, you know, working with a group to facilitate that.
I guess I'm up. Thanks, Austin. I'll just start with an attempt to answer the question by agreeing with what Austin just suggested. I think in addition to establishing or the benefit of establishing the opportunity for that experience with mainland companies, I think it also affords our folks the chance to build trust and rapport with these organizations, which, you know, based on my experience, is really important for them to actually gain employment, to actually find a pathway into a mainland company. As far as closing goes, I guess I want to maybe share that I think we need to be a little cautious about trying to build another Silicon Valley here. And it's not to say that that's what we're trying to do, but there sometimes tends to be the tendency to visualize that as, you know, the end in mind. Now, I think one of the things that we ought to take into account is our local situation. Our existing industries, the local environment, the challenges we have being out in the middle of the Pacific and then adding technology on top of that, adding software solutions on top of that. And that would allow us to create this gradual and sustained transition. It's not like ripping the Band-Aid off and introducing something completely brand new, but allowing our workforce to actually transition into new technology, software, for example, by finding ways to have that be relevant for the industries that already exist, right? And by that, I mean energy, transportation, agriculture, ocean health, and so on and so forth. The list is very long, and we have all those opportunities here. The question is, can we build on top of that all the stuff that we just talked about today to make those things even more relevant, and also for our solutions to even have more impact locally? Thank you.
Thank you.
My turn, right? Well, first on the issue of internships, we've always had internships on all of the films and movies and TV shows that come here, and a lot of our kids have gone into the industry that way. It's a little more difficult right now because of COVID and stuff. I want to sort of echo what Noel is saying, that I tend to be I'm a skeptic about this whole idea of like Silicon Valley of the Pacific or whatever. The reality is we do have some very successful companies here that actually are tech companies, like Oceanet, and some that we don't think of as being tech companies, like Servco, which I went to a presentation from their executive vice president, and he talked about, I didn't realize they're a $1.8 billion business. I think of Servco as being like, if you can buy a Lexus, you go see them, or a Toyota or something like that. But he did a slide, which I have subsequently used in some of my presentations, of the kind of jobs that they're looking for, because they're a 100-year-old company and they're looking to become a $3 billion company. And they had things like videographer and social media and agile and stuff. And they really see themselves as a tech platform in the future. And though there was not a single car salesman job that they were looking for to fill as the future comes, as they know self-driving cars are coming soon, and so, et cetera. So, they're really looking to the future. And there are people here that are looking to the future that are already here. People don't talk about, except when Edwin Snowden comes up, places like Booz Allen is here on Oahu. The military is an enormous employer of the tech industry and stuff. So, we do have things that are already here, but I think we all learned, I don't know if any of you were around here for 221, but 221 was something that I think it was a pretty big tuition learning experience for the state, because it's something that I think has tainted legitimate tax credits, like what I'm talking about in film and television business, with something that they didn't mean for it to blow $1 billion hole in our budget, but it did, because people didn't know. Some people were very smart about how to use it, but whether it was for capital aggregation, workforce development, or trying to get companies to start here, nobody could figure this out. And at the end of the day, it was about tax avoidance. And that's not something that helps anybody. So I think, but the lesson from that shouldn't be, oh, let's never be in these businesses. The lesson from that should be, let's be careful how we craft our legislation as we go forward and what we allow to access that legislation. So, I think again, we have an opportunity in this crisis in that everything has been distributed. And Hawaii is a fabulous place to live. And I'm very lucky to be from here. And I think everybody here feels very lucky that they chose to live here or be from here as well. So let's take advantage of that. And let's also take advantage of the natural ability of our students, who can be very good at this. But again, education is aspirational, so we have to believe in it as well. And the most encouraging thing that I'm sort of seeing from the big industries here is they're rethinking this too, because it was always just too easy to just make money off of real estate, to make money off of tourism. And now they have to say, let's look at something different. And let's get our own skin in the game on this. So I'm actually encouraged by what we see in the future, but I think it will be a very difficult 2 to 5 years in terms of the realities of what the budget cuts are going to be in every industry.
Thanks, Chris.
Well, perhaps supporting what has been said, we originally this panel looked at software industry on its own as a potential new sector for our island. But really the truth is there is not one single industry nowadays that does not rely on computer science. There are computers or smart machines everywhere, even in farming, even in education, in health. Everywhere you look, there is a need for workers who understand the language of computers and who can control and work with computers. So we would be strengthening our whole economy, all of our industries as a whole by having a really well-trained workforce in computer science.
Awesome. Well, with that, I want to say thank you to all of our panelists once again. This was wonderful. We know that when we first had our technology panel, we did not have enough time, and so the question came up about the broadband strategic plan, and that was mentioned on that one. We talked a bit more on that call regarding broadband and some of the larger issues. Today was really trying to hone in a bit more into the software, the creative media side of things. And I think, we got a lot more information and definitely some nuggets to move forward with our conversation. So I would like to say thank you to all of our panelists for joining us. Thank you for sharing your mana'o with us this morning. Thank you to our participants who made time to be on the call. Again, this session was recorded and will be on the Vibrant Hawaii website. It is a short work week this week, so give it about a week or so before the recording is actually posted on the website, but it will be there along with all of the 6 others. And at this time, I'd like to just turn it over to Ashley if there's any last thoughts. This is our last panel. So thank you for all those of you that have joined us on previous ones. This was a run, and we are getting to the point where now it's time to start writing.
Thank you, Farah. I'm just so energized after today's conversation. I'm really glad that we took the time to take another look at and hear from additional folks in this space, because there's a lot that we can do, a lot of potential, a lot of opportunities for us to leverage, I think, if we are smart enough and brave enough to go after them. So thank you all for taking the time. Excellent presentation. Thank you, panelists. You all are very brilliant. We really appreciate you sharing your mana'o with us. This concludes our 7th CEDS panel. Be on the lookout for more communication on how to get involved in helping us to craft our action plan. Take care and aloha.
Aloha. Thank you.
Hello.